right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety treatment. And thank you all so much for joining me for this question and answer based podcast. If you have questions that you would like me to answer on a future episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can send me a question over there. You can also send me a question over at Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over at Instagram. You can also certainly send me an audio question, which if you listened to last week's episode, you heard an audio question. Those get bumped up to the tippity top of the list, and those get answered as soon as possible. So I've got some exciting questions coming up. I've got some exciting interviews lined up. So we're going to have some experts on to talk about some things. And I think it's going to pan out to be a pretty interesting next couple of episodes. And I should say, today's question is also, I think, very interesting and very applicable to a lot of people. These are questions that don't often come up in podcasts like this, but there's certainly questions that do come up in private practice, do come up in the lives of individuals. And for that reason, we're answering this question. So it's going to be a little bit of a diversion from typical just kind of OCD and anxiety treatment and discussion of things. We're going to be talking about sex. We're going to be talking about things of that nature. And specifically, it's going to be geared more towards sex from a male's perspective. If that's not you, that's okay. There might still be some aspects that apply to you. But if it doesn't, there'll probably be another episode. If there's a question that you have from a woman's perspective or female's perspective, shoot me the question. I want to hear it. And likely speaking, someone else out there is going to want to hear it. So shoot me a message. Again, go over to Fearcast Podcast. You can send me a text message or a text question over there. I am working on putting on a little button on the website so you can send in an audio question directly there. I just have yet to do it. But up until then, go over to Instagram, and that's probably going to be the best way to get that question out to me. If you have an audio question you want to send in, but this question today was sent in by Ward. I was sent in a little while ago, but I think the question's timeless, as it were. It's a weird way to say it. Point is that it's still going to be information that's up there. I hope everybody out there is doing well in podcast land, in your season of life. We're in the middle of summer, and man, it's just starting to be hot. I don't know about you, but I hate summer. It's a firm stance, hot take. Literally, because I could do without it. It's too stinking hot. I'm here for the weird weather. I'm here for rain. I'm here for cold and fog and stuff like that. I should not be in Southern California for that obvious reason, but here I am. You go to grad school in a certain place, and then you get a job, and then you get married, and you start having kids, and you're kind of stuck sometimes. So here I am, being stuck in Southern California. Yeah, there are worse things out in life, but you know what? I just have to deal with the heat. I'm going to complain about it, but I'm also going to keep living here. So it's that toss-up. It's that reality that you can complain about things all you want. You can make some changes, but there are just some things that you're not going to change. I'm making that. I'm aware and knowing that I'm not going to make that change, and yet still complain about it. All right, we could talk about whether or not we should make a change or whether or not I should just suck it up and deal with it. And I am dealing with it. I'm just sweating a lot. So there's that. I have that problem that if I'm sitting, I have a sit down job, which is perfect for me. But if I stand and try to move in any sort of way, it's just instant, just sweat. It's really uncomfortable. All right, I'll stop talking. Y'all didn't need to hear that. All right, enough about me. Let's talk more about Ward. So Ward's question is, they say, I haven't listened to every episode of the podcast. Most people haven't. So I haven't listened to every episode, but this question, this question may have already been answered. But I'm curious if you have any advice for me. In the past few years, I've been struggling with sexual orientation OCD, SO-OCD, formerly known as HOCD. we've talked about that. With the main obsession that I was turning gay. Those around me thought I was, or that I'm subconsciously gay. That's a sneaky one too, right? Like it's deep down. It's so deep down. What's his name? Norm Macdonald has a great joke about that. I'll try to splice that in here.
Well, I guess the biggest thing that nobody knows about me is I'm a deeply closeted gay man.
What? You're a gay man?
I'm not gay. I said I'm deeply closeted. I'm as straight as an arrow.
So you're a gay man who won't admit it?
No. Do you know what deeply closeted means?
Yeah.
It means a man who will not acknowledge that he's gay.
Yes.
So I'm telling you, I'm not gay.
But we'll see if I actually end up doing that. All right. Then goes on to say, while the good news is that through therapy, I have improved leaps and bounds. I'm still, I have a solid hold, but it still has a solid hold on me in the bedroom. In all honesty, it has given me a lot of issues where I hyper focus on my erection. And if I either fail to get or to maintain one, it is because I'm gay. Unfortunately, this has spiraled pretty far with the thought of having sex gives me anxiety, and my libido is in the dirt. I love the podcast and appreciate everything you do. All right, Ward, this is a great question. It's a great question because, a lot of times, we're going to talk about the obsessions directly, right? A lot of people just are kind of on the front end of treatment where, they may have this sneaking suspicion that maybe they've got this obsession and what should they do? And then we're going to talk about cognitive distortions and challenging the thoughts and making space for uncomfortable feelings and thoughts and emotions and sensations and all that stuff, right? But I really appreciate you're in therapy, you're doing the thing, and you're getting a lot of help, but it's also really focusing on the bedroom, right? So there's kind of a combination of things that could be happening, that are probably happening, that I'm going to try to address, some of which may or may not apply to you. So, if it does, great. If it doesn't, great. It's hopefully going to narrow things down, or at the very least, give you and or someone else out there something to think about when it comes to all of this. So, first off, I'll say this. So whenever I get a question, I try to Google a couple of things just to kind of get my head on straight, to kind of, see if anybody else has answered this or if there's any information I might need to try to compile and make some notes. So as usual, I make a bunch of notes and then throw it up here. So, but inevitably, I'll tell you, my Google algorithm, as well as every other OCD therapist's Google algorithm, is super weird. This is a joke for anyone who's going to grab onto this. I'm probably on the lists of something. I don't know. But OCD therapists, man, we Google a lot of things and a lot of questions and a lot of hypotheticals. So inevitably I Googled this week a lot of questions about libido and getting and maintaining erection and anxiety's effect on sex and erections. So my Google algorithm is going to be super fun for the next little bit. All right. So sex and sexual orientation OCD. I went backwards in time with that one. Sex and these obsessions can be really tricky, and they really feed on themselves, right? So for some folks, sex can be, and this can be for men or for women, sex can be a confirming compulsion, right? It can absolutely be affirmation that, yes, I am attracted to this person. I'm attracted to this type of person. I am still the person that I expect myself to be. It confirms everything that you believe about yourself, right? But unfortunately, it can work backwards on itself too, right? So it turns on itself when then sex does not go as anticipated or as expected, right? So if there's an expectation that's going to go one way, but it goes a different way, then it kicks off those obsessions again, and sometimes it feeds right back into the initial obsession, right? So sexual orientation OCD can certainly be triggered by unwanted erections, right? So just having them in the middle of nowhere, having them at times you don't want them to be, again, not as expected, right? We expect we expect to go through our day, theoretically, penis havers, men have this expectation we're going to go throughout our day not getting erections. And yet sometimes this happens. And this conversely happens with women. And as it goes, then it happens in the other way around. If you don't get the erection, if you don't get the arousal that you expect, it tells us a story. If you get an erection when you don't want it to, it theoretically tells us this story, right? So this is very, very common. It's not weird or bad, or it's not a sign that you're broken. It's that these things happen. It's a human experience, right? So that's some reassurance I'll give you, and we'll keep moving forward with it. So a couple of questions I'm just going to toss out there, and I'll talk a little bit about some kind of an arc of today. I want to talk a little bit about some physical aspects of things, something to consider. I'm going to read a big direct quote from a website I came across that talks about the impact anxiety has on libido and maintaining or getting an erection. We'll talk a little bit about increasing libido, if that's something to consider. Some ideas about certainly acceptance, compassion, and also exposure as it goes, right? So you've already said that you're working on this with a therapist, or you're getting some progress. Awesome. Every single bit of this, I also want you to then bring to your therapist to chat with them about this information to see what's going to fit within your case and disregard stuff that has nothing to do with your case. Just because this ridiculous podcaster said it does not mean it is perfectly applied to your scenario. Unfortunately, the reality is I'm kind of guessing. I got your long paragraph about what's going on, but there are obviously going to be a lot of little things going on in your case that may be different and may require a slightly different approach. So I'm going to put that caveat in there, and I think that goes for pretty much anything that I would say. So one of the first things that I want to do when I'm working with someone who has this question, I'm going to try to rule out some biological things, right? If they're saying their libido's tanked, and they're saying they're having trouble getting or maintaining an erection, I want to rule out some physical things. Now, as it turns out, am not a real doctor. I'm not even a fake doctor. I'm not even like a doctorate. I have a master's degree, which is awesome. But I'm not a medical doctor, right? So some questions that a doctor is likely to ask, and you can talk to your doctor about this once. But one of the questions is are you able to get and maintain an erection at other times, right? Are there other times of the day that you get them, or do you get the dreaded NRB, the no reason boner? Do you get them in the morning? Sometimes dreaded morning wood. Point is, are you getting them, right? This can help rule out some just biological aspects that physically may be impacting your ability to get an erection. Are you able to get and maintain an erection while masturbating, right? So this is, one of those things where, if you're by yourself, pressure's off, are you able to get one then, right? Similarly, are you able to orgasm either alone or with your partner, or, I don't know, in groups or on the roof or outside of a 7-Eleven in your car? I don't know what you're up to. Point is, are you able to, have an erection, maintain an erection, and then go all the way to orgasm in other contexts, right? Outside of just trying to achieve, PIV sex with your partner. Those are some of those questions to ask. Now, some of those things to also consider is, have you had your testosterone levels checked? Now, I'll go a little bit more into that, which actually I'm probably going to go into there right now. But the point is that testosterone levels can absolutely be impacted by anxiety. And then again, for OCD, it's going to feed right back into it, right? If you have lower testosterone, that's going to impact your ability to maintain and get an erection. It's also going to impact your ability or your just libido and desire and interest in having sex. So that is going to feed back into that obsession. Well, I'm not interested. Well, that must mean that I'm gay, right? Because OCD's story, right? If you are just uninterested in having sex, it's not because I'm extremely anxious and I have these ruminations, and I historically have this, and we all know that anxiety is what we call in the biz a boner killer. It's because I'm the opposite of who I think I am. I'm quote worst case scenario, right? I'm not who I expect myself to be, and therefore my life has to change or is going to change, and it's going to be awful. right? That dreaded story. So I'm going to read just this big quote and then something to consider as we just kind of keep moving forward. So this is from healthymale.org. This may be completely wrong, sounds pretty good, but this may be some stuff to consider. I'm not selling it, am I? All right, here we go. It says, when we get a sudden fright, our fight or flight response kicks in, so that we can cope with the immediate threat. The response is due to the activation of our sympathetic nervous system and is an unconscious way that our brain helps to protect us. The response includes a quicker heart rate and deeper breathing, which can help us to meet the threat head-on and outrun the danger. It also includes inhibition of bodily functions that aren't needed to fight or flee, like digestion or having an erection. Once the threat is gone and you've beaten it or outrun it, things kind of go back to normal. But if the threat continues, like perhaps with a repeated OCD cycle, or a whole lot of problems keep coming up like that, our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis, this is where my brain starts, this is above my pay grade, gets activated and tries to help us cope with the ongoing stress. Activation with HPA axis results in an increase in cortisol, our main stress hormone, which raises our blood sugar levels and blood pressure and inhibits our immune system. High cortisol levels are linked with anxiety. Cortisol also inhibits testosterone, the primary male sex hormone, which is responsible for the sex drive, otherwise known as libido, and might contribute to the blood flow changes that cause an erection, right? So in other words, like stress and anxiety are related or can impact testosterone levels, and oftentimes lowering those, and other stress hormones can impact and lower testosterone, which then plays a role in our sex drive, right? All right, that's enough of my reading from that. So point is, if this is something that is persisting over a long period of time, it may be worth having a chat with a doctor, having a test to check your hormone levels to see what's going on. Now, of course, they may say this is being impacted by your anxiety, which it absolutely may be, but it's one of those things that you want to rule out. All right. So moving on from this is that what I encourage anybody to also do is to have a conversation with your partner. So having a conversation with your partner about how they feel about the sometimes inability to get or to maintain an erection is incredibly important. A lot of times this can be, or the anxiety can be exacerbated by one, having a difficulty maintain or getting an erection. And then you start getting in your head about what this means, what the other person's thinking, whether or not it's ever going to come back, blah, blah, blah. We get into this really elaborate stories, which increases your anxiety, which further decreases your ability to maintain and get an erection, right? So one of the things that's incredibly important is have a conversation with your partner about it. Is there pressure coming from them? Is there judgment coming from them about this? Or is that judgment and criticism and expectation coming from you, Ward? Is that what's happening? I don't know, but that's a conversation to have. I'm willing to bet, and I think oftentimes, every time I've had this conversation with my clients and they've had this conversation with their partner is understanding, gets it. They know you, they love you, and they want you, not just the sex, they want you. So there is an understanding, there is a compassion about it. And you can take that as permission to take yourself off the hook, to let the pressure off that you have to, or that there is criticism and judgment about it, right? Now, I know that that isn't the magic bullet in this to try to get this, all to go away and have an erection come flying back, but it's one of those things along the way that can be really helpful. Now, interestingly, and this is just a side note, while we're talking about anxiety decreasing libido, interestingly, anxiety can also increase libido. So anxiety can make it just go off the rails and go bonkers. So if this doesn't apply to you and you're wondering why you're anxious and you're all of a sudden bonkers horny all the time, that can also be something that's happening. But that's for another conversation. All right. So as I Googled then how to increase your libido, something came up over and over and over again. The number one thing was address anxiety. right? Because anxiety and depression significantly reduce libido. So this is something that came up over and over again in listicles and articles and whatnot. Addressing anxiety is going to be an incredible help. So some other things that are going to be important within that. Now, I'm skipping over this because you're working with your therapist and you're talking about how to decrease anxiety. Some things that also contribute to this in developing kind of an anti-anxiety lifestyle, as I call it, are just stuff that I know is kind of boring, but are also incredibly helpful. It's addressing your sleep, trying to get more sleep and more quality sleep, right? Addressing your diet, eating healthier. Now, I have a theory, and I think it stands up. I think we all know what eating healthy is. And now, there are going to be some people who are going to argue with me on this, but I think we all know, generally speaking, broadly speaking, what's healthy. Right? It's, eating more whole foods, real foods, eating less processed foods, fast food. Now, does that mean that you have to cut out all fast foods and only eat lettuce and carrots and broccoli until your eyes explode? No, you can have this balance, but I think generally speaking, we all know cutting out, eating more salads and eating less burgers is a healthy approach. Can you be healthy and eat burgers? Of course you can. You get what I'm saying, right? So making simple changes in your diet can also help. Additionally, exercise and increased activity is going to help. I can't tell you how helpful for me personally exercise has been in addressing my anxiety and my depression. I've recently started going back to the gym and just being more diligent about that. And I'm telling you, it's made a significant impact for me. Now, that's an N of 1, but that's another thing that's listed on these things about things that will help, right? So also increasing the quality of your relationship. So trying to work towards connection between you and your partner. Furthermore, to help increase your libido, you can also work on focusing on foreplay with your partner, right? Making sex more about fun and connection between you and your partner, and kind of reducing the pressure on the expectation that sex equals PIV sex to orgasm. PIV means penis in vagina sex, right? If that's what sex means, and it's penis in vagina sex that leads to orgasm, if that's the definition, then it's going to increase a lot of this anxiety. But if it's about connection and fun and, just trying to be together and broadening this idea, and I want to address that in just a bit, that can be helpful, right? So, and some sites mentioned that boosting your libido with some of the things I just mentioned is related to increasing testosterone. So that can also help in the process. One website I came across, and I'll just share this, it called it distraction. And I want to shift the language in that. So we'll talk about it we're talking about as talking to your partner about kind of sexual fantasies or like things you want to do rather than on what you can't do in the moment. Right. And I think that's actually some helpful advice, right? So in that moment that, you're having trouble getting or maintaining an erection or whatever, it's easy to slip into this mindset that's like, I'm a failure and it's awful and it's going to be terrible and blah, blah, all this stuff that of what they may or may not be thinking about, right? But instead, shift over to your partner and maybe have a conversation about, sex that you would like to have or what you want to do. Sharing those experiences can, again, it distracts from what is happening. You can also refocus. I think this is a more appropriate distraction. Say, well, today it's not about me. It's about them, right? So the preeminent researcher, Dan Savage, he talks about broadening your definition of sex. And I think this is actually really, really helpful, right? So if your definition is only PIV sex that leads to orgasm, then you're going to have far less sex than if the definition of sex means connection, mutual masturbation, if it means just focusing on them or having them just focus on you, or if it's just sensual touch. All of that, if you broaden that definition out, then it's going to really help with that idea that, you are having sex, you're having connection. You get the idea. So it can help decrease some of that pressure. So, all right, something to also do with this. We need to really practice, or you need to really practice mindfulness and acceptance of this process that you're in. This process that you're in kind of sucks and is frustrating and is disappointing. And I hear you on that. But when it doesn't happen, I want you to practice observing those thoughts, I'm practicing, having an expectation that those thoughts are there, right? You can name the thoughts that are going to be there rather than like fighting those thoughts when they're there. We've talked about the bus analogy in the past from ACT, where it's this idea that, you are the bus driver of your life, right? And you put the label on the front of the bus that says where you're going and what you're doing, right? You have this thing. And there are going to be passengers that are going to get on your bus, some of which are expected and some of which are unexpected. And they're going to try to tell you things about you, or they're going to try to tell you to divert your focus or divert where you're going. But you're the bus driver. You get to decide where you're going to go. And it's going to say, you're awful, you're terrible. It must mean that you're gay. It must mean that you're not attracted to your partner. All this awfulness, right? Your job is to acknowledge that those are thoughts, right? You can say, yeah, this is the thought. And this is Dave that's in my head that's just a jerk and is trying to tell me that I'm gay all the time. This is Frank who constantly tells me that I don't really truly love my partner. And instead, I'd be much better off, letting go of everything I know about in my life and just, embracing my homosexuality, right? All right, those thoughts are there. Of course, they're going to be there. And I'm going to keep going in my connection with my partner, right? What goes along with as well is having a lot of compassionate statements and supportive statements, right? Resisting the urge to ruminate on negativity, self-criticism, or just projections into the future, right? Statements like, this is about connection, not my performance, right? And this can also come in that discussion that you're having with your partner and hearing that, the reassurance that she's giving you and sending that back to yourself, right? It can also be anxiety kills arousal and I'm feeling anxious right now, but it won't be this way forever. Right? It can be, I am not my anxiety. I'm not my sexual performance. Other things you can say is, anxiety, you got me again, but, I'm going to get you next time. And then you acknowledge it, you extend compassion, resist judgment, and refocus. Maybe, sex is not in the cards today. Okay, tomorrow then, right? Or we're going to shift and it's just going to be about them this time, and that's going to be great, right? So again, we're broadening this definition. We're letting go of expectations, right? We're treating ourselves, you're treating yourself kinder in the process, knowing that you are in a process, right? Okay, so lastly, we can talk about exposures. Now, I anticipate you're doing a lot of exposures with your therapist, but other things you can do to this certainly are going to be practicing scripting, right? Now, scripting for this may be focusing on what you're specifically afraid of in this moment. The idea is to feel those feelings, make space for them, not try to fight them out, not trying to justify them, but say, this story makes me feel uncomfortable, right? We talked about, in the beginning of last episode, I talked about like that weightlifting idea, right? It's that it doesn't matter how you lift weights, it matters that you lift them. So in this, we're trying to address anxiety and fear and saying, I can lift this weight and I can feel anxiety in a lot of different places, even in this. And I can have this thought without compulsion. So I can have this thought about maybe being gay. And I don't need to do anything about it because it's a thought, right? So that's the point of scripting, is to practice having this thought in mind. So maybe the script is about not getting erection and what your partner says, right? Your partner says X, Y, and Z, and it's all terrible and you hate it, etc., right? Maybe it's the story about what not getting an erection means about you or for you, right? So maybe it does mean that you realize in the middle of it that you're gay and you have to change your entire life and come out, and it's gonna, you're gonna get rejection and criticism or whatever it's gonna be. But again, all of this is just, it's not to pick on stereotypes, it's to tap into what are the things that activate the anxiety, right? Again, I don't care what the narrative is. The point is to grab onto the thing that brings on that sense of anxiety. That's the weight. And we're tapping into that and we're lifting that weight and feeling that anxiety more and more without compulsion. And the more you read that script and the more you let the thought just be there, your brain and your body start to tolerate it and get used to it and learn that thought isn't dangerous. And we learn that it's not dangerous when we treat it like it's not a danger, right? Okay, so another subject for a script is never getting an erection again. well, that's your life now. You're a eunuch, I suppose. And you're just going to live your life as this, forced asexual being that's always wanting sex, but never going to get it again. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. But I'm going to cut this episode off here. And I hope this episode has been helpful and answered some of your questions, gave you some stuff to think about. And we're kind of rapidly just flying through this. But Ward, I really appreciate this question. I appreciate the vulnerability to send this question in. So if you have further feedback or further questions, go over to Instagram. Anybody else out there, if you have recommendations, if you're a sex therapist out there, and some of the stuff out there is, or some information is missing, or you want to add to it, or just say, hey, this was bonkers and this is not going to work. I want to hear about it. I want to share it. So message me over at fearcastpodcast.com or at Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast. So Ward and everybody else out there, until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.